Hello everybody, and welcome to part 2 of Can You Defeat Elden Ring with one of the best spells in the game for masochism, as we'll of course be fully embracing our own masochism as one who enjoys these types of games should to fully understand this spell. And thus, if you want to know the rules for this particular challenge, I suggest you look at the description of this video. That will take you to the previous video, which will have a timestamp of the rules in that video, so that I don't have to repeat them here in this video. And also, if you like the previous video, if you like this video, and if you would probably like any other videos that I do, please like, comment, and subscribe. It helps. It's one of the first times I ever asked, and it would be very much appreciative for me. Thank you. Okay, thanks. Kiss, kiss. Let's continue on with the part 2 of this glorious masochistic adventure. So when we last left off, we fought Godric the Grafted, a boy that defeated me once and forced me to run out of mana because of his dodgy, slippery ways, but we defeated him eventually, and now it's time to move on to greener pastures. And what I mean by that, to engage in more masochism, as instead of actively moving on to bosses like, I don't know, Renala or Radon, I instead thought, oh, you know, maybe it'd be a better idea if I test my prowess against Flying Dragon Agil and the Tree Sentinel. And well, let's just say one boss was easy, the other one was the hardest boss we fought thus far. The dragon, Agil, was the easy one, because he's a big boy, he likes to stand still a lot of the times, and the way Tibia summons works is that you can actually target something's head and they'll actually go for the head. It just, a lot of the times, if any mob moves at all, including this dragon, at any point when you cast that spell, they'll just move out of it. But Agil and these dragon type of mobs likes to stand still a lot of the times to allow you to actually connect with a lot of these attacks, making him a very easy fight to win. While certainly it was annoying, being the fact that you can't use a horse while casting this spell, because I guess the animation is too amazing to allow that interaction to coexist, but it was still easy. You know, I had to dodge a few fire, got him one hot shot. Tree Sentinel, however, was a different story, as the Tree Sentinel turned out to be the toughest fight thus far in this playthrough, simply because of its mobility. Mobility happens to be the thing that counters Tibia summons more so than anything, though Tibia summons has probably plenty of other counters, but mobility happens to be the biggest one, as even a creature moving at slightly faster speeds than a snail has a chance to get out of this spell's hitbox. So imagine how difficult it could be fighting against a boss or creature that is on horseback, and thus making this challenge a little bit more difficult than, say, the other boss fights. So I did manage to defeat this boss, however, but it took me far more tries than it did Margit or Godric, simply because of its mobility, and trading blows with the Tree Sentinel wasn't nearly as effective than other things, and the poise did basically nothing for this fight. And what I end up having to do to defeat this fight was to basically punish its attacks, no dir, but also to stick into its craw and use this one thing that the spell has going for it, which is to reduce your own hitbox while you're casting the spell by a little bit, so that you can dodge out of an attack, so that you can actually do a positive trade where you're hitting them and they're not hitting you because they're missing you completely. It's incredible that that's how that works, but that was one of the bigger ways of how I was actually able to damage the Tree Sentinel, and as well as punish other attacks. And so the Tree Sentinel has been the toughest fight thus far, and quite frankly a fight that was incredibly unnecessary for me to do, and only a way for me to indulge my own masochism. So let's move on forward for fights that actually matter to continue on this playthrough. So now that my masochistic tendencies have been sedated for now, it's time to travel to the Lernia of Lakes and to the Rea Lucaria Academy so that we can defeat Renala, Queen of the Full Moon. But first we have to get to the doggo, in which, on the way there, I definitely did not fall off the elevator.
Wait till you see the. No, 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 no.
I'm too skilled for that. I'm too in-depth for that. I'm too intrinsically inclined for that. Yes, I'm using words that I don't even understand the meaning of to distract you from the mistake that I definitely didn't make. Nonetheless, time to fight the Red Wolf of Radagon. And well, this fight turned out to be harder than the Tree Sentinel. Not much of a shocker, as the Red Wolf of Radagon is clearly hyped up on some form of ADHD or something, because this guy likes to move back and forth all the time, and thus making it hard for me to hit my spell, obviously. And so, the best way for me to actually engage with damage for this particular fight was to just simply trade hits. That's the way it is for this particular fight. And what about my poise? You're probably wondering, you're probably asking that question. What is poise for this challenge? Because I'm trying to answer that question as well. Apparently poise doesn't exist because barely has it been useful to me at all, but it was definitely not useful to me at all in this fight, as I had to trade blows basically throughout making damage. Now luckily the Red Wolf of Radagon has a very small health pool, and thus I was able to trade blows while taking a fair amount of damage while dealing even more damage to the Red Wolf of Radagon. The other thing that allowed me to deal damage was it being stuck in the corner when it was doing its magical sword thing at me, and I was able to basically punish that. Other than that, he basically kicked my ass a lot of the times, taking twice the time that it took me to defeat the Tree Sentinel, making it definitely the toughest fight thus far. But I still managed to take down the doggo, because thankfully, if I can deal a fair amount of damage to the thing that I'm fighting, I generally feel confident enough to deal with it. And we defeated the Red Wolf of Radagon. And now it's up to Renala. So Renala, Queen of the Full Moon. What I would like to tell you is that this fight was easy. This fight was cheap, it didn't require much effort, and I was able to get my second shard and then move on to that stupid dummy Margit the Fell King boy very easily. But unfortunately, this is not the tale I have to tell you, as Renala for this challenge was impossible. And while certainly maybe if I grinded enough to get max FP, max intelligence, max all these things, maybe stretched my rule set a bit to allow all the buffs in the world and stuff, maybe it'd be plausible, but even then I think it would be very improbable. The way this spell works, it's easy to hit the targets that you want, but you have to hit 3 daughters for one before Renala even gets dropped, but then you do such a minimal amount of damage to Renala that you even deal more damage, arguably, based off health percentages to the Tree Sentinel while it's holding its shield. That's how pitiful the damage is when you're able to fully hit all 3 skeletons on Renala, in which she's an unmoving target. It's just she doesn't take any damage. And thus, I was led with a choice. Continually bash my fist on this wall known as Renala again and again and again, and thinking, wow, I really enjoy the pain of my bloodied fist on this wall again and again and again. Or think to myself, even though I'm hitting my fist on this wall, my fist is in incredible pain, but the wall is unmoving. The wall doesn't do anything. And thus, I came to the sad conclusion that this fight was impossible. After nearly an hour of trying to do various things, trying to use just only Mana Flash, trying to, use the Mimic Tier, which that is a part of my rule set, that is in the initial rules, by the way, always, if I find myself on a roadblock, I will use the Mimic Tear. And none of it worked. The Mimic Tear was stupid, and I just didn't have enough mana to at all even get her to her second phase. Like, I can't only imagine the frustration of actively fighting a mobile target while doing absolutely no damage. So I actually find that this challenge in particular is impossible when trying to deal with Renala, unless I can cheat out her magic resistance. Then I think it's probably a plausible fight in that sense. But because of that magic resistance, this fight's impossible. And I'm sorry that I failed you all. But good thing that there's a second opportune chance for me to become Elden Lord, and that is to go on the path of Radahn. So that is where we have to go. For we're not giving up. We will rid ourselves of this curse, and we will become Elden Lord. So I decided to go the Carrier Manor path for my path of redemption to fight against Radahn and do Ronnie's quest chain. And thus, after going through some handy individuals, I had to fight Royal Knight Loretta, in which, as you would expect, being a tree sentinel boss of sort, except casting spells, this fight was a pain in my ass. Because just like the tree sentinel, being on horseback allows you to dodge a lot of the attacks, and thus I had to get into her craw and do stuff, but she didn't do the same thing the Tree Sentinel did, and only really allowed me to punish some of her attacks by the lowered hitbox because of the casting. And there's only one attack sequence that actively allowed me to do this. Everything else basically was useless. And I would like to point out again how pointless Poise is. I don't know why I decided to look like a fool for this build, just so I could not care for Poise, but we're sticking with it. And Poise was, of course, useless. And then we get to the second phase, now that we managed to get that far, and it's just a cluster shit. I'm unable to do practically anything. She barely uses the move that actively allows me to punish her without me getting punished, because I can't trade in this fight. She just deals too much damage, and I don't deal enough damage in order for the trades to actually be meaningful, and thus I chose to ultimately do my one audible that I did have in my rule set. Check it out in the last video, in the rules, to use the Mimic Tear. Now, the Mimic Tear wasn't useful in damage in sense, and that's what I figured it wouldn't be, because it's casting Tibia Summon, so it's not like it's doing that. What it was useful for, however, was distracting Loretta long enough for me to cast my own Tibia Summon so that I can eventually deal with her. Now, I'm sorry, I betrayed the trust of you all. I'm no longer a masochistic individual for not engaging again and again in this fight without using a Mimic Tear, so I'm sorry for that. But sometimes, I really hate hitting a wall and nothing happening, okay? Okay, you understand? But at least it was possible with the Mimic Tear, okay? We can get through this. And I promise you, I will not use a Mimic Tear against the biggest Giga Chad of Elden Ring, which is, of course, Radahn. So after dealing with Ronnie's quest chain as well as going to Redmane Castle, we're finally able to meet the big man himself in battle, Radahn. And how much of an awesome fight this truly was. There are very few moments in games like Elden Ring or games in general where I'm able to, at the end of the day, go, damn, I had fun. This was some glorious things that happened. Like, I can't help but feel a feeling of euphoria after this fight. Which is why, at the end of my spiel here, I want to show you the entirety of the fight that I had, just to really emphasize how intense my final confrontation with Radahn truly was. And so before that, I want to go over, of course, my strategy really going into this fight. So there's, of course, a few scuffed things when it comes to using this spell against Radahn. Even though he has a big size, that really doesn't matter. He still is relatively mobile, and because the Tibia Summons likes to hit around his midsection, or his head even, it sometimes misses those marks, and in particular when a position where you're supposed to be able to hit him, supposedly you're unable to when he puts his swords down to imbue them. That should be a free hit, but Tibia Summons thinks that it wants to attack his head, and thus as soon as the spell is over, Radahn's head actually goes above his shoulders at that particular point, and thus the tibia summon just hits directly in front of him, thus missing everything. But luckily for this fight, there is a grace period where I'm able to do damage very consistently without getting hit as frequently. And that is, of course, during his 3-pronged strike attack, or his roar attack, I guess, which is a very telegraphed attack where he does these attacks in quick succession that you're able to easily dodge, and then right before he hits his 3rd sweeping attack, you're able to do the tibia summons thing and do that consistent damage. Now, when he imbues his swords with gravity magic, he then does a gravity surge attack that you have to dodge perfectly in order to avoid damage, which is very important because you do not want to really trade attacks with Radahn because every damage you take matters. And with his 2nd phase, with the gravity rocks and all that stuff, you just have to practically avoid that, and when I feel like the rocks are going to hit, I just get on my horse and just hightail it out of there, because if I just get collided with 2 of those things, I'm a goner. So I just wait till those things are gone and then wait a bit when he summons them again. He does a bunch of other crazy nonsense that I'm surprised I was able to deal with whatever in his 2nd phase, but you should honestly experience that when I actually show the video. That's basically what I did. It was primarily counteracting this particular attack that he did that allowed me to get consistent damage, and thus, well, you'll see the end result of the fight here. Hello again, and well, that's the end of this video. That moment was honestly one of the most euphoric-inducing moments I've ever had in a video game. And I can't believe I have to thank this pathetic spell to give me this moment. But sometimes weird stuff happens in games, and well, that fight's amazing. Spell isn't, but that fight is amazing. And I hope you all enjoyed it. Until next time, where we tackle this challenge again to see if we can go on further with this spell, and to see if this challenge is impossible, well, we'll find out next time. And until then, I'll talk to you all later. Bye-bye.